Okay, we are live. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good evening to everyone tuned in. Parker, we are talking gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. And as you have heard, the president has actually addressed this issue in his statement, in his live broadcast today, and highlighting the very importance of what measures the government is taking. And he did speak about the National Strategic Plan, and coincidentally, I was part of the consultative phases of the National Strategic Plan, and myself with Tabile Lenkwane, who is going to be a guest later on today, was actually going to unpack on the discussions that we had then with the Deputy Minister of Youth, Women and People Living with Disabilities, Professor Mkhari. Some of the things that the president touched on, speaking about 13 regional courts that they have created, he spoke about safe homes, the kits that are given to police, the survivor-friendly rooms that are available at the SAPS, and he touched on the legislative amendments. But we are going to touch on that a bit later. Today's lineup, we have a very interesting panel. I will introduce them just as they come on individually. We have a lady who is called Miss Phinah, who is the CEO of the Soul City Institute for Social Justice. We have Cheryl Zondi, who is a singer-songwriter, public speaker, and MC, and the founder of the Cheryl Zondi Foundation. And I'll just go introducing them actually individually, just as I welcome them. Like I said, we have Miss Anda Dungulu. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. We have Mr. Kefentse Mkhari, and we have Ernest, Hasha, and we are going to try and get Tabile Lenkwane later with us. Now, to get started, we all know that gender-based violence and femicide has become an issue in this country. In fact, it has become a pandemic, and we're currently going through a double pandemic, obviously faced with COVID and femicide. From the names that we've heard over the years of people who have been, of women who have been either raped, violated, abused, or murdered. We have heard of the names of different women, and we are actually becoming tired of hearing these names repeatedly, but just a different name each and every day, and literally each and every day. We've heard of Karabo Mokoena, Uyinene, Cheryl Zondi. We heard of Kefentse, who was the pregnant woman who was found hung from a tree. We heard of your different names, and to make it worse, the headlines that we are confronted with each and every day. I mean, just the past days, when I went onto my social media pages, I was confronted with different headlines, and I'll read them out to you. And these are just a few headlines. The first one being a missing 79-year-old Brakpan woman's body was found cemented into the bin in her backyard. And this was according to Benoni Times. Times Live reported that a Davidson woman's body was found under her boyfriend's bed wrapped in a blanket. Times Live again reported that a woman's body with her hands and feet tied were found in a body in a bag on the Golden Highway. Again, we hear of a man who was arrested for raping a 6-week-old baby, and this was according to EWN. News 24 reported that a murdered mom wanted to get a restraining order before her death. The sixth one tells us that a Free State woman was killed, set alight by her boyfriend for drinking with friends. And this is according to Times Live. Now, these are just a few statistics, a few headlines, and it's almost become a norm where we are hearing of these headlines. But the pertinent question also then becomes, are these people being caught? Are the perpetrators either being caught, or is justice being served? And I was speaking to the panel earlier on, and we spoke about how scary it's actually becoming, where the murderer is no longer the person on the street. It's somebody in your house. It's somebody that you know. But anyways, let's get straight into it. I think let's get Ms. Phinah Kodisang, who is the CEO of Soul City Institute for Social Justice, and then we will get the rest of the guests with us. Good evening, Ms. Phinah. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you please unmute your mic? I think it's been muted from your side.
Yeah. So okay. I can hear you. And hi, everyone. Thank you for having me on your panel.
You are very much welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Right, let's get straight into it. Just please tell us about the Soul City Institute. And after that, I'd like you to just unpack gender-based violence for us a bit.
Okay, thank you. So Soul City Institute is an intersectional feminist organization. We deal with social justice issues, with gender-based violence being one of our core mandate. We are an organization that, is there to remind government and everybody else that everyone, the right to life must be respected by everyone, and that right is enshrined in our constitution. So when that is violated as an organization, we take it upon ourselves to make sure that, we stand with the victim, we advocate on behalf of victims, those who can't speak for themselves, and also hold people accountable that are supposed to be held accountable. So for us, gender-based violence is a serious issue, and we have seen, as you mentioned in your introduction, how of late, after we moved to level 3 of lockdown, how the crimes started coming out as though they were not there before, and we know they have been happening because during the lockdown, we had a number of cases, I think 2,000 cases that were reported to the command center, to the GBV command center. And we are not surprised that this is the status quo, because violence against women, and I think for me, we must position it as violence against women as opposed to a generic gender-based violence, because that's where then people will start arguing men also get abused. But we know that it's not at the same intensity as women and children abuse, So we need to separate it and not speak of it broadly as gender-based violence, but mainly as violence against women.
And I think we will touch on that aspect where you say that we need to specifically position it as gender-based violence against women. We will touch on that a bit later, but let me just go to Anda. She is from the Black Womxn Caucus. Good evening, Anda. Thank you for joining us. Okay, I think you're going to have to unmute your mic for us a bit, please.
Sorry about that.
No
good evening, everyone. My name is Anda. I'm from the Black Womxn Caucus. So the Black Womxn Caucus is a feminist organization which is basically focused on fighting all forms of gender-based violence. And we have 3 wings in our organization, where we have Bereka Musadi, which works with women in communities, working class women. We have Black Womxn Caucus Universities, which works with university students, and not just vet students, but university students, hopefully across Johannesburg. We have also Black Girls in Caucus, which focuses on girls, what the forms of violence that they face in schools. So basically what we do is we support victims. We support them in terms of psychosocial support. We have a group of social workers from universities and private practice that have been assisting since the beginning of the lockdown in terms of offering psychosocial support to victims of gender-based violence. But on a larger scale, we form part of protests that fight against GBV. We support victims. We also advocate for victims and try to keep the focus on GBV alive in the spaces that we exist in.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to come to Cheryl. Please just unmute your mic for us. Right, Cheryl Zondi. I want you to just touch a bit on the Cheryl Zondi Foundation before we get into the broader discussion. We're also going to get the two gentlemen to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started. Just tell us a bit about the Cheryl Zondi Foundation and what led you to start it up.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to this conversation tonight. So the Cheryl Zondi Foundation was established in 2018, November, during the month of bringing awareness towards gender-based violence. And basically what brought it about is, well, I came out about my own personal story. I was abused in a sacred space for a number of years by a pastor, a community leader, and I came out about this in the year 2018 on a very public platform, and the support that I got from South Africans and people from other countries alike inspired me to start the Cheryl Zondi Foundation. What we do there, we basically focus on abuse in sacred spaces, right? Which is a little more complex than abuse when it's someone grabbing you off the corner of a street. It's a little more intricate and a bit more layered than, normal abuse, if I may use that term. So what we do is we bring awareness about the kind of abuse in sacred spaces, which goes beyond physical, sexual. It is also financial, psychological, and spiritual as well, the abuse of beliefs. And we aim to just inspire victims and survivors to speak out and tell their stories. The main thing that we are busy with now is working with the Office of the Public Protector to tweak the witness protection program, because when I had come out, I realized that the witness protection program of this country is not really conducive for victims, blameless victims that is. It is more a system that is designed for criminal informants, people who have committed crimes. And so we are trying to make those changes hand in hand with the Public Protector's Office, just saying that, victims shouldn't be uprooted from their homes and from their support systems. They should be allowed to move on with their lives. They shouldn't have to change their names. That all sounds more like punishment for criminal informants. So that is one of the things that we are busy with right now. And we just aim to help more and more people come out against, especially people who are leaders in a spiritual sense, because they take people hostage. And it's difficult to, detach yourself from situations like that. So that's what we're all about at the Cheryl Zondi Foundation.
Okay, thank you so much, Cheryl. Let's come to Ernest Hasha, who is a former student leader. He is a former UJSRC Secretary General, and of course, he's the CEO and founder of Digital Outlooks. Can you just touch a bit on, in your years as a student leader and as well as a leader now in society and a dad, just your general, just a quick 1 minute take on what's currently happening in the country and how that makes you feel.
Thank you very much, Anisa, and good evening to the other guests. On my side, Anisa, I would like to highlight a couple of things. I would say number one, as men, we need to, before we can even say anything, we need to go and educate ourselves about this whole concept of patriarchy. And I actually went back yesterday and read a little bit about what patriarchy is. And I actually realized, I was speaking with my girlfriend earlier on today about how patriarchy is implemented culturally, whether it's through ownership of property, in which a man is regarded as the man that has to take over property once the parents have passed away. Those are simple and systematic ways of us identifying how patriarchy is enforced in society. And I think as men, if we can educate ourselves more about patriarchy, we'll be able to understand this concept even further. And I think as a student leader, I think you might be aware also, Anisa, we had incidences of sexual violence, particularly within the concept of GBV at UJ, in which a student, as you might know, was actually raped within the corridors of the university. And as a result, we were asked to come up with initiatives for us to lift doing public events for students. We were asked to introspect as students, create more programs in which people can speak, but educate students more. But I think as we have the conversation today, I would like to focus more on patriarchal violence. What is patriarchal violence? Men trying to not lose the so-called power that men have, in which it is there, and men not willing to give up that power, and by default, having controlling tendencies in different forms, whether it's using money as a means to control women, whether it's using intimidation as a means to control the behavior of women. And my stance is that men do not have any entitlement controlling women behavior. And maybe we can chat more about that. That would be maybe my take on the particular subject.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And just to bring in Kefentse Mkhari, who is a former VIS SRC president, and of course, he is the founder of his own association. Can you just tell us a bit more on the programs that you guys run in terms of tackling such stuff, or in support of a woman? Because I've seen you have been running a lot of successful projects. So if you can just take us through that.
Peace be unto you, Anisa, my fellow panelists, as well as people that are tuning in. Thank you so much for having us. You are quite correct. We are indeed social entrepreneurs, and we founded a company called Makhandeni Events, which is an events management and marketing company that is solely focused on corporate social investment projects. So we run such projects, we develop strategies for our clients, and we also consult on such projects. So we have been engaged in a number of projects, one of them being the 25,000 sanitary pads drive, which is a program that is aimed at assisting young girls, who encounter their periods in the most indignified manner because they cannot afford sanitary pads. And we believe that our contribution in that space also speaks to this issue of GBV, because gender-based violence is also structural. And I think we don't talk enough about that. For instance, when you deny girls the right to learn simply because when they are on their periods, they can't go to school, it's some form of violence, where else you have made things such as condoms for free. And I'm not trying to compare the two because they are equally important, because we're a country that has high rates of HIV and AIDS, But I'm just saying that we are trying to respond to, the extent of gender-based violence at a structural level. We're trying to raise the consciousness of society in saying that, look, for as long as we are not supporting the girl child and ensuring that they are able to do whatever it is that they must do, whether going to school or participating in extramural activities, we must support them, because not supporting them and denying them that opportunity simply because they cannot afford sanitary pads for a natural cause that they must undergo, it's some sort of violence. So we need to support them as much as we can. So it's such programs that really we are engaged in that are trying to raise the consciousness of society to say this thing called, or this demon called gender-based violence actually manifests itself even structural. And I think we also need to address that as we engage in this conversation, Anisa.
Definitely. I'm hoping to touch definitely on everything that all of you have mentioned, from the patriarchal structures, your systematic violence against women. Also, if we had to look at things like the wage gap. But let me come to you, Cheryl. You spoke about you standing for trial. What convinced you to finally get the courage to stand up and take on such, a powerful man? I'm sure looking at the status quo, people don't always believe the victim or the survivor, and that we will actually touch on the labeling of such just a bit later. People don't always believe a person. So what is it that gave you the courage to actually speak out?
It was a number of things actually for me. First and foremost, it was being tired of carrying the shame that I felt did not belong to me, right? I had been walking around feeling ashamed and just feeling guilty over this thing that had happened to me that I didn't ask for. And so detaching myself and disassociating myself from that shame and that guilt and that blame that did not belong to me from the very beginning was one of the things that convinced me. And I think this is something that a lot of victims go through. You know, as soon as something happens to them, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a trait of that exhibits strength. You know, because women are so strong that they take or just being so consumed by what has happened to them, you know. So that was the first thing for me. And then secondly, what really helped is that I had a very supportive family, right? I have a very supportive family unit, people that chose to believe me from the very beginning, that supported me. And so I knew that the most important people in my life would have my back, even if the public or the police or the authorities didn't believe my story. And then the last thing I think for me was just being angry enough, you know. I'm not sure if everyone can still hear me.
No, we can. Okay, I think we just lost her a bit. So just coming to you, Phinah, can you just tell us, Cheryl speaks about having a support system in place. Can you just tell us how important it is to actually have a support system when going through this, and just take us through the importance actually of having a support system with such when such happens, or going to the police, reporting your case.
Yeah. So if you are a victim and no one believes you, I think you go through a lot of shame and sometimes regretting even reporting. So support systems are important, and that's why organizations, are existing to offer that support, because sometimes in families and for economic reasons, sometimes they don't believe when you report, because like we were saying earlier, rape doesn't happen outside our homes. It happens in our homes, and it's people that people that are supposed to protect you sometimes who rape you. So when you come and you say your father has raped you, I think it's a difficult conversation to be held in the family, and most likely you won't be believed, or when they believe you, they still choose the side of the father because the father is providing food in the home.
Yeah.
So it's important that victims know that there is support, whether support comes from the family, whether it comes from neighbors, whether it comes from organizations. A support structure is definitely needed and should be in place all the time, especially because when you go to court, lawyers tend to treat you, they take that you are a liar, and they are there to prove that their client, is the innocent one. So you need people who will encourage you not to give up. And I think that's what Cheryl had. That is why she was courageous enough to stand on the stand and tell her story, against the powerful men.
Thank you. I'm just going to come to you, and people often, the naysayers often speak about, oh no, it's how a woman was dressed, or no, she was too drunk, or no, the perpetrator was drunk, and that is why he, violated.
Apologies, everyone. I don't know if
we did lose you there for a bit, Cheryl. We'll come back to you in a while. Yes, so I'm sorry about that. So I was saying most people actually blame this on the victim. So what is your view? Okay, I think we're losing Under there, but I think I'll just throw it to one of the guys. Ernest, can you take this one for us? When people actually blame the victim for the way they were dressed, or the fact that they were either drunk, or say that the perpetrator was drunk, what is your response to this?
My response is that, we can police women's behavior. And that is the first thing that we need to to clarify. In terms of how women behave in society, it is up to any woman's choice as to how they behave. I think one thing that we need to question is, why is it that men view women in a sexual context at all given points in time? And using that vulnerability as an opportunity to advance their own sexual desires. I think it is very problematic, and that is a conversation we need to have as men. And we should not hit around the bushes. It's just a matter of men being unable to control their own behaviors, particularly because of the conversations we have on sexuality or on sexual advances or on sexual attraction. I think we need to speak as gents about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And it is unacceptable that one will take a vulnerable situation, such as because someone who is drunk basically is someone who's like someone who's under 18. They're unable to think rationally at any given point in time. So as men, you need to know that it's very basic. You need to know that if you try to do any sexual advances with someone who's drunk, they're unable to think rationally. Therefore, your pursuit for any sexual benefits is therefore of a legal, it's of an illegal act. And I think if we speak more about this as men, we'll be able to change our behavior. So I don't think that we need to question how men should dress, or how women should dress, or how they should conduct themselves. What we need to address is that why is it that men see sexual advances all the times when they see women in those vulnerable situations?
Okay, thank you so much. Just coming to you, and I think let's go into how we can actually tackle gender-based violence. And I think I'm going to put this to everyone. Just give me a few pointers as to the steps in which we need to take as a country in order to tackle gender-based violence against women and femicide.
I think the first thing for me, we have to be honest with ourselves and the people that we have in positions of power in this country. We have powerful men and very influential people in parliament who have had charges of gender-based violence against them, and they are still sitting in those seats, and they have never been held accountable for their actions. In order to have any solution that will tackle this thing, we have to start with them, because they are the image that reflects what actually happens in society. So if you have people in positions of power first being held accountable legally for cases of GBV, I think that will send a message first and foremost to society about the seriousness of these issues. And secondly, we need reform in the courts, we need reform in the police force, we need reform even in societies in terms of how we treat victims of gender-based violence. The culture of shame, the culture of guilt, and just overall the culture of silencing women and girls and children that go through sexual violence, and just people generally who go through gender-based violence. I think there's a lot of educational programs that need to start in our societies, and then legal reform. So we need to see perpetrators being held accountable and very harshly for the things that they do, in order to basically deter more perpetrators from committing those acts of violence. And even within the prison system, we need rehabilitation. At this point in time, you send perpetrators to prison, and there are no reforms, there are no educational rehabilitation systems that actually shape them into becoming better people when they come out. So I think it's just basically we need to abolish the whole system and start afresh. I think.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just going to bring it to you, Phinah. So UNDA speaks about, people in positions of power who have legal charges on them. What is the next best step to take if we know that people have been convicted of crimes in the legal system, like she mentioned? What is the next best step to take, knowing that the courts have already declared that this person is a perpetrator? What is left for us to do if the courts have not acted yet?
Yeah, I think we should move away from being reactive as a country. I think we wait for something to happen, then we respond. We're not preventative. Our approach is never about preventing. So we need to, to employ preventative strategies, but also it can't be one department that is responsible for, it can't be the Department of Justice. So all departments should actually have a gender-based framework, a prevention framework, but also hold each other accountable. UNDA is right in saying they are sitting in parliament, and we know that, some of them were charged, but I think they make themselves above the law instead of applying the law. And when law enforcers or people who are supposed to ratify the law in the country don't act seriously on the law, how do we expect normal people like you and me to take the law seriously? I mentioned the Constitution, and that, in the Constitution we have enshrined rights, and the right to life is one of those. But when that right is taken away, we then recognize the rights of the people who have taken away people's rights in protecting them, sending them to prison, and 2 days or a week later they are out on bail. We lose evidence. A lot of things happen and we don't take serious action. So harsher sentences must be introduced, but also, we must make sure that we walk the journey with the victims and we correct, the wrong that has been done to them, because some of them lose breadwinners and they are left like that. So how are we as a country then making up for having failed that family by not preventing gender-based violence and making sure that when they've lost somebody who was their breadwinner, there is something that a department like social development can do to make sure that that family continues, the children in that home continues to go to school. They don't lose their lives when they lose their breadwinner.
Thank you. Just before I come to the gentleman, Cheryl, you've been, and you'll just let me know if you're able to respond to this question. You've been through the systems, through trials, through, I don't know, the worst, when you did come out. Do you think, from a personal experience, that courts are doing enough? I mean, your case has taken a couple of years now. Do you think that our court systems are doing enough, one? And two, in terms of the length that these trials take, I think people or rape survivors along the way will lose hope and courage. So just tell us a bit if you think the courts are doing enough and where you think they can improve.
Well, in theory, our laws and our courts are good enough, I suppose, in theory. But in practice, it's a different story. Personally, I feel that as a victim, or as a survivor rather, I wasn't handled in the best way. I'm not being handled even now in the best way possible. I think the system is structured in such a way that victims are the ones who find themselves defending their dignity, when in turn it should be the perpetrators who should be defending their dignity. I struggle to grapple and wrap my head around the fact that victims are the ones who have to defend their stories, when in fact the perpetrators are the ones who have to tell their stories, and then the victims should counter that. Already structurally, I think for me it's very unfair. It's uncompromising, especially. I think it's a system that is not sensitized enough in terms of trauma as well. When you have been through a traumatic experience, especially that of a sexual nature, you tend to shoot yourself in the foot in terms of giving evidence on the stand, right? Some of the details may be mixed up. You don't you don't remember dates, you don't remember specific details, and sometimes you may even contradict your own story. But that is the nature of trauma, and I think that the system does not. It wants a victim to remember every single detail. They want the victims to remember and speak up, immediately after incidences, not 20 years later, which is why which is why it was such a struggle to get rapists. Rape victims to be allowed to speak up after years and years of having experienced the rape. So I think there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done in terms of just being more compromising for victims and giving them the necessary preparation as well. I remember before the trial, in my particular case, I wasn't really shown around. The usual thing is that you must be shown around the courtroom and know where everything is. I walked into there on my first day, and that is the first day that I saw everything. I was exposed to everything on that day, so there's a lot to process and a lot to deal with. So I think in terms of doing that, the system could do much better. And then just to reiterate something that I've seen, not something that I've been through myself. I went to a case through the Zondi Foundation. I attended a case in a magistrate's court in Hammanskraal, where something that Phinah was talking about, that people were let off for very low bail, 1,000 rand, 1,500 rand, for all kinds of heinous crimes against women. I remember there was one who had raped a 6-year-old. I believe she was 6 years old, and he was let off on 1,000 rand bail, even though there was overwhelming physical evidence and DNA attaching him to the crime. So things like that. I mean, the system can't only kick in when there are cameras that are viewing. When the world is watching it, it mustn't only kick in then. It must kick in when there are no witnesses as well. You know what I mean? Because the system is actually an advocate for these people that are trying to speak up and get bad people off of the streets so that they don't hurt the next person. And I forgot your second question. Could you please repeat that for me?
Okay, no, we'll come back to that. I just want to quickly go to Kefentse. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I want to come to you, Kefentse. With such conversations about, women are tired of, repeating, we need justice, and the very same perpetrators are men. Do you think that as men, you guys, and if anyone from the panel also wants to respond to this, and I think I'll also throw it to you, Ernest, do you think men deserve a seat at the table to discuss a way forward when it is fellow men that are committing these crimes? Because you find that the frustrations stem from survivors who just don't even want to see men anymore because, men have been painted with the same brush because obviously it's men that are carrying out these crimes. So do you think that men deserve a seat at the table to discuss issues and a way forward of gender-based violence against women and femicide? Please do.
Thank you, Anisa, for that question. Thank you once again for that question. I think indeed we should have men in this conversation. One, because as you rightly said, that they are perpetrators of this thing, right? And you must remember that these things, they happen on so many levels, and they are categorized in so many areas that some men are not even conscious of, things such as stealthing, things such as knowing that, when a woman says no, she says no, even if she had agreed, in the first round. When she says no in the second round, it's still wrong. So I feel they need to be in the space to be educated, to know all forms of perpetration of this thing. But secondly, because I think they are victims, because you can imagine if someone's daughter is being raped, is being killed, that person is a victim of this particular thing. And I'm sure they would want to, know how should they better respond to the situation, what form of support is there for them as a father who has just lost a child because a man killed her, or raped her, such things. How should they deal with those things? But more importantly, they would want to have an active role in defeating this demon that has just resulted in their daughter losing their lives and so forth. So I think is important. But more importantly is the attitude and the character that I think we should come to these conversations with as men. And it should be a character of wanting to learn. It should be a character of wanting to lend a hand and not dictating what the solution should be. Because I think women are well within their rights. They are capable to tell us that, look, just stop killing us. When a woman says no, she says no. This is gender-based violence, and you should know it. And thereafter, we should go amongst ourselves as men and say, let's start educating each other. Let's start talking more, as Ernest has said, about these issues, so that we can also hold ourselves and each other accountable. So that when I see a man manhandling a woman, I'm able to step in as another man and say, that's wrong. You're not supposed to do that. So I think it's important that we should have everyone in this particular conversation. But as I said, women should lead the conversation. We should not dictate to them. We should come with an attitude that wants to listen, an attitude that wants to lend a hand.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And Ernest, just to, I wanted to ask you something. I'd actually just slipped my mind. No, actually, I don't know, considering South Africa's dark past and the inequalities that surround us and, poverty and, just all these gruesome things, do you think, and of course it is a contributing factor to such crimes that take place, but do you think this is, I don't know, I can't even say an excuse enough, or do you think that at the core of our problems are these inequalities, and at what point do we, stop using these inequalities to justify such stances? Because you find that people who do commit such atrocities want to use that as an excuse. So at what stage do we stop blaming these inequalities?
I think, Anisa, that's a tough one, but I would like to highlight, what we spoke about in the beginning, which is a response to that, to say, historically, women have been sidelined in terms of coexisting, in terms of power in society. And how you look at power, you can look at it from a household perspective. If I have a partner and we are married, this building, we are going to say, once I die and my girlfriend dies, it's going to belong to my son. It's not going to belong to my daughter. So you do have those small, settled ways of managing power in which men maintain that power. And this is a very uncomfortable conversation amongst many families.
Definitely.
Particularly because if you raise the issue of power, and power in the context of financial power, because in most cases, we see it in that context. I think we need to address those structural problems in which power is maintained amongst the line of men. And once you have that being dealt with, you'll be able to have women who are comfortable enough to come up, even when their husbands are doing, because rape does not only apply to boyfriend and girlfriend or a stranger, it also applies in marriage. You'll have people being more comfortable in coming out because they know that financially there won't be any shortfall on their end. And I think if we address this particular issue of patriarchal violence in that context in which men try to maintain that power, we'll be able to deal with it. And another thing, Anisa, and I'd like to add on what President just highlighted, the issue of community-based approach, it is very important. There was an instance in which where I was staying, some gentleman was beating his woman. And by just us breaking a window, entering in that house and stopping that man physically, it made a huge difference. And I'm not saying we need to respond violently and beat men who are doing this. A small act of actively disrupting violence in your next door, it's very important because many people are saying, it's an affair of two people. So we can enter. I think we need to have a community-based approach. And the reason why men also need to be part of these conversations is so that we conscientize people more to say it is very important for you to act if you are hearing something happening next door, because all of us, we are complicit by default because we do not act, and we hear these things from our own communities and we do nothing. So I think a community-based approach is important, and joining other structures like CPF. We need more women voices in CPF because that's where you get to engage with the police mostly. So that would be my contribution for now, Anisa.
Thank you for that.
Anisa,
yes.
Can I add?
No problem.
So it's a fact that men are afraid of other men, and it's a pity because instead of challenging them, they keep quiet. And I know Kefentse was saying they need to be in those spaces to hold each other accountable. But where we are right now in South Africa is a lot of men are afraid to hold other men accountable because of how violent they are. So we need to get to understanding the root causes, and we can blame apartheid and how it treated men in the past. We can blame alcohol. We can blame all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, we have a justice system that is failing women. We have a patriarchal system that is failing women. We have, so women are just bearing the brunt on all fronts. And we need to find a way of dealing with it, without even shying away from naming it, and naming and shaming even those men that are perpetrators. And I know we spoke in some platforms about the register, sex offenders register, that needs to come, and where when you apply for a job, they check whether you've had any record, because sometimes they don't check all those things. So they need to make sure that every department, like I indicated, plays a role, and we will, if we are committed and there is political will, we will address this issue.
Definitely, that register is something that we do need. Just to hijack you there, but Hasha spoke about, maybe or maybe not responding violently. Do you think it's about time that women actually start responding violently to such things? I think in India they have this gang of women who have grouped together, and whenever they hear of violence taking place or mistreatment of women, they go together in a gang and they deal with the perpetrators in a violent manner. And I think I'll also come to Anda, but can I get from you, Phinah, do you think that's one of the approaches that we need in South Africa to deal with such violence from men?
Are we not going to create a cycle where now women are the perpetrators of violence? Violence can never solve violence. There must be other ways. I am tempted to say, personally, as Phinah, yes, slap the hell out of that person, so that they feel the pain you are feeling. But it will not solve the problem, because now you are going to have it in reverse, where women now are the ones that are killing men and perpetrating violence against men, I don't think we should promote violence. We should find other ways.
Okay, let me bring it to you, Anda. Do you think that responding with violence is one of the approaches that we need to take?
Well, in my personal capacity, I'm also inclined to say that it definitely should be the situation, but it's unrealistic if we look at the fact that the reason why we are where we are now is because of unequal power dynamics between men, women, and everyone who falls outside of cis heteronormative identity. So I think that the more rational solution would be to find ways to stop the violence altogether, and not merely perpetrate the violence. It seems as though if we would take that approach, it would just be a cycle of violence, from women to men, from men to women. But I don't think, like, when we speak of it right now, it's something that makes sense in my imagination because of the imbalance of power between men and women. I mean, with the statistics as they are right now, I think that kind of response would only make men even more violent towards women and children.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me bring it to you, Pres Kefentse. What's your approach on women actually using violence as a form to get rid of this?
Look, I think if we don't respond to the issue as seriously as we need to and as quick as possible, we will eventually get to that point. I think you would remember that not so long ago, and I'm sure Anda would remember this, there were, the Shambok committee that was dealing with people on campuses of such nature, because not precisely because they wanted to be violent, but because the institutions did not have mechanisms to deal with these cases, or they did not act as swiftly as they should have. And when the system is like that, it therefore gives the victims no choice but to get into a defense mode and to defend themselves at whatever cost. So I'm not saying it's correct to respond violently, but I'm saying the more we procrastinate and prevaricate, we are pushing women to that level, and it's not a nice level to be, because you must remember that we are a violent society in general. In general, it's not just gender-based violence, but we are a very violent society. And the means that we need to pursue, they should be means that are proactively responding to that fact that we are a violent society. And we should look into very creative means, such as introducing a curriculum on conflict resolution, that would look at how family units, first of all, respond to conflict, that would look at how we respond to conflicts in our relationships, not just intimate relationships, but as colleagues, as friends, and so forth. And I think lastly, it should be, how do we then empower even the victims? Because I think Phinah raises a very important issue that says, when we look at the victims of gender-based violence, we do not look at only the people that the act has been perpetrated on, but we also look at people such as the kids in that space. We look at people such as the elderly people that these victims were looking after, so that as we introduce this curriculum and as we introduce these measures to deal with gender-based violence, we can also be able to take care of the victims, the psychosocial support that they need, the material support that they need, the income that perhaps has been taken away as a result of this person being a victim of gender-based violence. So I think we need an inclusive approach, not necessarily a violent one, but Anisa, if we don't respond
Kefentse was just about
as quick
to...
as we should and as seriously as we should, we will be giving women no choice.
Definitely, and I agree with you there, because I think I'll come to you, Cheryl. And I think I'll come to you, Cheryl. I think it's I don't want to say it's easy to speak when such things are not so close to you, because I think, for one, when you had been raped, I think the next best thing you would have wanted to do was to get rid of your perpetrator. And I'm trying to look for an immediate solution. Courts take time. You go to the police stations to report such problems, and the officers either turn you away, or you're not even given a restraining order, and you end up being the next statistics. I want to take it from your view. Do you think that violence is what will solve this problem at this current stage that it is in? We are in a state of crisis. We are literally in a pandemic of its own. Do you think that violence is one of the ways to solve this right now as an immediate factor?
Well, my subjective opinion would be that yes, maybe violence will get the message across and put the other gender in our shoes and allow them to feel the pain for a change, then maybe that way they'll be able to make better decisions. But the real change for me does not involve violence at all. I think the real change stems from the mindsets that need to be shifted, right? We have circles, groups of men that sit around watching the game, maybe over beer, and in these conversations that they have, they objectify women, they disrespect women. They speak of women as objects and as escapades, sexual escapades. And no one in the group is brave enough to say, even if they know it in their hearts of hearts that is wrong. No one in the group is brave enough to say, look, what you're saying is wrong. You don't speak about women in that way. You don't address a woman in that way. You shall address women with respect. Change stems from there, because these are conversations that women are not a part of. We are not there hanging with the gents all the time to hear what they are saying about women. In fact, they wait for us to exit the equation before they start having these kinds of derogatory conversations, And also, I agree with something that Kefentse said. We need, as a nation, we need a very disruptive approach when it comes to educating people, especially young men from a young age, about sexual violence. I remember when I was in primary school and going into high school, there was sex education, have safe sex, and this is how you contract HIV, blah blah blah. Those things were ready and available. Teachers would tell us about them, and there would be diagrams of your body and demonstrations as to which part of the body someone is not allowed to touch. If they touch your hand, then it's green. If they touch your boob, then it's orange. If they touch you on your private parts, then it's red. But no education as to how to become a person that does not touch a person in those areas is implemented. We are educated how to avoid the abuse, but we are not educated about how to avoid being the abuser. And I think that's where a disruptive approach would come in. I think, as Kefentse said, in curriculums, even from primary school, in as much as we take sex education seriously, we need to educate about not being an abuser and not falling under this patriarchal mindset and not using your power as a man, especially over a physically weaker link like a woman. So I think a more disruptive approach educationally is what is needed.
Definitely. Okay, I think we're just going to break for a minute or so. But when we come back, I want us to talk about, just to touch quickly on the hashtag men are trash versus the hashtag not all men are trash. I also want to come back to what Phinah had spoken about, categorizing this as a gender-based violence against women. And of course, we know people out there saying, no, but men are also killed at 6 times the rate that a woman is. I want us to also just touch on that and then give our closing remarks. And I think that we will do after the short break. When we do come back, please do stay tuned.
Is reaching out to the most vulnerable of our community in South Africa, Yemen and Gaza. 400 Rand can provide a family with a food pack in South Africa and 500 Rand a hygiene pack in Syria, Yemen and Gaza. With your help, we can save lives across the world. Donate now. Go to www.islamic-relief.org.za.
With over 80 years of experience, IG Hussein and Company are renowned for their quality Islamic wear and goods. IG Hussein and Company stock a variety of Islamic items, musallas, kitabs, Medina dates, perfumes and exclusive gifts. We guarantee you a unique and friendly shopping experience for the entire family. Visit our new branch in Overport at 202 Kenilworth Park, Brickfield Road. Open 7 days a week with ample parking and wheelchair friendly. Like us on Facebook or Instagram at IG Hussein for our latest promotions and updates. IG Hussein and Company, your Islamic lifestyle.
You may be out there in the working space building your future. Perhaps You are as comfortable on the sports field as you are in the boardroom, or hard at work being the best student possible. You could be spending most of your time at home grooming the leaders of tomorrow. Either way, you need to feel confident, strong, and comfortable. Eternity Sanitary Pads, now available at a store close to you.
لا تسألوني ارحموني تكرار السؤال تلك سنين مرت مني نعيب زمننا وما في العيب سوانا ونهجو ذا الزمان لغير ذنب ولو نطق الزمان لنا هجانا ربي أنت القريب على محالي من بعيد يا ربي بطشهم شديد آذوني ربي أنت القريب
Hello and welcome back to African Flavor with myself, Anisa Mazimpaka. We were having a very progressive discussion with regards to gender-based violence against women and femicide, and of course, our guests joining us in studio. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly touch, and I think we have Tabi in studio with us too. Phinah, you mentioned something very important when you spoke about this being gender-based violence against women. Why do you say that we should, why is it very important actually to categorize this as such and not use the general scope?
Statistics have shown that women are the most vulnerable, and if we look at even the recent cases, of GBV that have been in the media, it's only women. So for me, it's a pandemic within a pandemic against women, And while there are men who are victims of gender-based violence, I don't think they can compare to the number of women that are killed daily. We hardly hear of men, even in the news, whether it's because the news don't cover such, but we don't hear a lot about men dying as opposed to women dying. And it's a national phenomenon, we know it, so focusing our energy on gender in general and not zooming in on who is actually the victims, we lose sight. And that is why we might not end up even doing anything, because we will be engaging in philosophical debates about, but even men are being killed, and therefore, in defense of everyone, let's just look at men also. But we don't want to focus on, and we're not saying they are not important. I think it's the same argument that can be brought in terms of Black Lives Matter. We know that all lives matter, but where someone is, suffering more than the other, you must focus your energy on that person, even when others do matter.
Definitely. And I saw you shaking your head. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
I definitely agree with what Sis Phinah has said, but I think another thing that we tend to shy away from the most is calling the perpetrators by name and saying that it is men who are doing this thing. It is men. It is men we know. It is men we don't know. It's all the men we live in our societies with, and I feel as though because sometimes when we speak about victims, I don't know, the manner in which we speak as though they are faceless perpetrators of the thing. It's like something that happens, like it's an unfortunate event that happened, but there are actual there are perpetrators that men do this to women, and we need to focus more on perpetrators. Like Cheryl said earlier, like in terms of even proving yourself and having to defend your dignity in court. It shouldn't be the victim that does that. It should be the perpetrators, and we need to hold them accountable and call them by name.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Cheryl and Ernest, I just want to come to the hashtag not all men that we saw come up. We've been equating that to the hashtag, the people that come with a counter when we say Black Lives Matter, and people are like, no, but all lives matter. Can you just take us through the hashtag not all men and the actual, how much more damaging that is actually towards the initial tag that says hashtag all men are trash, or even if you could elaborate for us what men are trash means.
Okay, so in my opinion, the men are trash hashtag is not here to villainize men. Every single man that is walking the face of the earth. That is not the intention. The intention is to highlight the fact that the majority of men are taking away the lives of the majority of women. That more women are dying and being abused and assaulted and violated at the hands of more men. And so as men, take accountability as a whole. If you know you are a man, take accountability for your brother, for your homeboys. That is what the hashtag men are trash stems from. And so in as much as the hashtag not all men is justified, because not every man, I suppose, is an abuser or a violator. It comes from a place of invalidating the stories of victims, which is very wrong. We can't be here dying and crying every single day, and then you invalidating these stories that are very, very important. And so that's my take on the not all men. I think, yes, not all men are violators, but your majority, the group, the part of the group that you are in is responsible. What are you doing about it? Are you being complacent and just turning away, turning a blind eye, like Ernest mentioned earlier? Or are you going to take some accountability? And so I feel hashtags like that, not all men, are very damaging and very dangerous, because they aim to invalidate these stories and make them seem as though they don't matter in the bigger spectrum.
Well, it seems like Anisa has left us. So I think I should just share my thoughts, because I think we're still live. So I don't think it would be fair for people to just watch us, NJ. So I think you're quite correct. And I agree with the former two speakers that not all men sort of dilutes the issue. And in fact, men are trash. It's an obligation on us men to reflect on ourselves. If anything, it's a rallying call to say, why would women or anyone in society refer to us as trash? It means there's something that we are really doing that's wrong, and we therefore need to say, how do we collectively start taking proactive measures to start cleaning ourselves up? Because we need to change the perception. We need to change the narrative. We need to be seen as people who could be trusted, to defend this country, to defend the most marginalized and the most vulnerable, and to be able to participate in society as equals to our counterparts, female and all our people in their diversity, but not to see ourselves above them. And I think the more people say not all men, they are evading the responsibility.
I think we might have lost.
Okay.
I think I'll just add on until maybe we get back, Kefentse. I'm a father, and most people I know they've been saying, when you say all men are trash, do you include your father? I think this thing it's all about awareness. It's all about making sure that we reflect as men. And I would say all men are trash purely because there's one comment from one of the viewers who was highlighting that this violence comes in two ways. It's either it comes mentally or physically, I would say. And the mental part, I would say all men were complicit. Because before it becomes even physical, there are tendencies that we demonstrate as men, which contribute as violence, I would say. Whether it's you trying to control your woman as to who she can talk to and who she can't talk to, which spaces she can go to and which spaces she can't go to. And ultimately, if she breaks your standards, you are bound to either be physical or be emotionally violent. So I think all men do demonstrate those areas of violence. And we need to reflect, we need to reflect on what is our role in terms of our relationship with women in society. Because some of our actions are not just actions. They are outcomes of certain behaviors that we demonstrate on a daily basis in trying to control women's behavior. And ultimately, it results into violence. So I think all of us as men, we are trash, and we need to definitely reflect on some of our conducts and how we relate with women in society. That is just my input.
Can I also call you out and Kefentse as well on the our women language that you use, and the one you used earlier, Kefentse, about this whole situation being some form of demonic manifestation or whatever. We need to refrain from using such language when we speak about these issues, because to me it tends to basically not all men the conversation that in and of itself. Like first of all, when you make this situation seem like some sort of supernatural manifestation, some demonic manifestation, you basically take yourself out of the fact that men, all of them as a unit, are all accountable for what's happening to women in this country. And it's not monsters or ghosts that do these things to women. It's human beings that are men, and it's you. And you need to look at yourself in the mirror and make sure that you see that the reflection that you see is exactly what happens to women. It's human beings that do these things to us. And in terms of the language of ownership of our women, it's very problematic, especially when we speak of things like accountability. I would like to think that as Abantu, we should be accountable for each other, all of us. And so, as Cheryl said earlier, if your brother has done something, you need to take accountability as a unit, as men, that this is your problem, all of you. It's not an isolated incident. It's a manifestation of generations of patriarchal conditioning, of culture and religious beliefs that
Yeah, Anda, I think I want to agree with you. You know, a lot of times you hear men saying we need to protect our women. Protect us from what? Because if we are capable of protecting ourselves, but if we are now fighting a system that takes away all the power that we have as human beings, that's where now you find men feeling like they need to protect us. But I agree with this language of ownership that is also problematic, because now if something is your property, you will treat it the way you want because it's yours, it's your property. Therefore, you can do with it as you please. So we need to also check ourselves in terms of language. Welcome back, Anisa.
Thank you so much for the welcome. And I do apologize for that. A bit of technicalities. I think we can also blame COVID, but I don't know. I don't know if you guys have done your closing remarks. So just before we get there, if you covered the hashtag not all men, because I think that's where I left you, Cheryl, and the damage that the hashtag actually does to the hashtag men are trash hashtag that's meant to not vilify men, but actually portray what the true reflection of what's going on. So I don't know if you have already elaborated on that.
Oh yes, we had a whole discussion. some educational points were made. Yeah. So
definitely, yeah.
I think
I trust you guys did that. Okay, then I think let's just move on to the closing remarks. I really thank you guys for such an insightful discussion. Let's start off with the closing remarks. I'll go with you, Phinah.
Thank you very much. It was very insightful. I think in the last week or so, we've been seeing the slogan on "I can't breathe." And I think as women in South Africa, we feel like we can't breathe with the violence that is being perpetrated on us. All we are asking for is space to breathe. That's all we are asking for. You know, we don't want protection from men. We just want to breathe. We just want to enjoy our freedom that is, given to us by the constitution of this country. So we ask that, gender-based violence is addressed, so that as women, we can just breathe.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Ernest, your closing remarks, sir.
My closing remarks, I think I'll just firstly say thank you very much, Anisa, for creating the safe space for us to engage as a collective. And this was more educational. We'll definitely look at the language that we use as men. And as I said, it boils down to that whole patriarchal system in which we are orientated to think in that way. And this is very educational. We'll definitely take it from there. I think on my side, I would say, let's go learn more about our privileges as men in a patriarchal context. Let's invest more on community-based approaches. If something is happening next door, just be disruptive. Go knock, do whatever that you can do to be disruptive. So that we don't lose any life. One life is too many. And the other one, I would say, let us definitely have conversations on family members stopping to protecting those who are perpetrating such violences, because you see a lot of family members who do protect perpetrators. That's another conversation we need to definitely have on how family members should stop protecting perpetrators. But beyond that, men, let's keep our actions in check. That's all on my side.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ernest, and thank you for joining me this evening. Cheryl, let's come to you. What are your closing remarks?
Anisa, thank you so much for this opportunity, to all share our opinions. In closing, I would just like to say to men, please do not feel attacked when women raise their voices and when women stand up for themselves. It is not an act against the existence of men. It is an act of uprising against abuse that we are sick and tired of, because we've been hearing about this and we've been going through it for centuries and centuries. Our great-grandmothers have gone through it. Our great-grandmothers have gone through it. Our mothers have gone through it. And we are going through it now. So please do not take it as an attack. If you are on our side, you feel the pain with us and walk this journey with us and take accountability. And to every survivor, especially those who have felt like they've been manipulated into being willing participants in their own abuse, whether via spirituality, religion, or even culture, or by virtue of just being in the same household as an abuser or being related to an abuser. Please know that it is not your fault. Please know that you did not invite any kind of abuse to take place. And please disassociate yourself from that blame, because it does not belong to you. Your voice is yours. Your body is yours. And the person who has perpetrated you and violated you just did not understand those rights. So please do not ever feel ashamed. And just to everyone who's watched, thank you so much. I just hope that we can take conversations like this outside of digital platforms and continue with these conversations in our households and in our workspaces. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I'm actually getting a bit of, chills running through my spine, and my hands are actually quite shaking, listening to your closing remarks, all of your closing remarks, because I think sometimes and I think we did mention this with this discussion, like we never think that the next victim is us, or the next victim is someone we know, and it just happens. And that's just the way that a pandemic works. A lot of people have either lost their daughters to murder. And I think that's also something we'll touch on next time, how rape survivors actually turn to suicide, you know, because people can't, it's not something easy to live with, you know, and that deals with the psyche. And I think, Phinah, that's what you spoke about, having these I forgot how you termed it, but having these conversations to ensure that women are actually okay once these things happen. But thank you so much to everyone who was joining, to everyone who was listening, everyone who's tuned in. I'm not able to access the comments on Facebook right now due to a bit of time constraints, but we will carry on this chat after this. Thank you so much, Phinah, for taking your time, Ernest, you too, and Cheryl, Zondi. This was African Flava, and we were speaking about gender-based violence against women and the femicide and how it has turned into a pandemic. Thank you so much for tuning in.